Hey everybody, welcome back. I am Dr. Brenda Whitehead with the Prof Chat channel, where we are all about maximizing college and minimizing stress. So today we are kicking off the series on stress in college with the question, what the heck is stress and how does it work? Now, this is an important question because before we can really start addressing our stress, we need to understand what it is and how it works. So at the most basic level, stress happens when we encounter something that has the potential to be more than we can handle. The term stress originated in the context of physics, where an object or a material is being pulled or strained by a physical force, sometimes to the point of damage. So think about a rubber band. It's built to handle a certain amount of stress or stretch, and it will bounce back easily. But pull it too far or with too much force, and it will snap. And this is a helpful metaphor for psychological stress, which is usually what we are talking about in the context of college. So, how much force or pressure or stress can we handle? And what happens when that pressure is just too much? There is something called the stress and coping model that can really help us understand all of the different pieces of this stress puzzle. Now, I'm going to walk us through the basics here so that we can really start to understand what is happening in our brains and in our bodies when we are experiencing that inevitable college stress. So let's jump in. First, there is some event or situation, something that knocks us out of balance. You may have heard the term homeostasis, which is like our body's ideal set point. This is where our body wants to be. When something knocks us out of that set point, knocks us off balance, we are driven to react and compensate in some way so that we can get back to that balanced state. So college brings with it a whole load of potential balance toppling stressors. So take a moment to think about all of the different ways that college knocks us out of our pre-college set point. We're usually moving to a new place, living with new people. We're figuring out our own routines, making decisions about things like food and finances and health that we've never really had to make before. We're also figuring out what it means to be an adult and how to step into that new identity. There's also the whole social and dating scene, which a lot of college students report as a source of significant stress. And then, on top of all of that, are the academic challenges that we navigate every semester, juggling new and more difficult content, due dates, and future career concerns. This is a lot, and it's no wonder that college students, maybe you, are feeling stressed. So we all experience a variety of stressors when we head to college. So why is it that some students seem so much more stressed out than others? Well, we are all different people with different experiences and different resources, as well as different ways of approaching the world. What this means is that two people can encounter the exact same situation or stressor, but have two very different responses to it. The differences here usually start with something called appraisal. Now, appraisal involves asking two questions. First, is this stressful? And second, can I handle it? We all ask these questions, even if we're not conscious of it. So let's say that you just found out that your World Lit class will now be taught by a different prof than the one that was listed when you signed up for the class. Now, this may seem relatively minor, but this is likely to cause at least a temporary off-balance feeling because it's a change that you weren't expecting. So the appraisal process begins. First, we ask, is this stressful? And specifically, is this stressful to me? Because remember, something might be stressful to one person and not another. So maybe the answer is no. We decide we don't really care who's teaching the class, or even if we're mildly disappointed, we decide, not a big deal. When we decide that a stressor is not stressful to us, then the stress process actually stops and we head back to that balance, that settled homeostasis. But if we're a lit major and we're counting on having that first professor because we really needed to connect with them for some career prospect, this could be stressful. Or maybe we've heard really poor things about this new prof, or we've had a really negative experience with them in the past. And so this might be stressful. So if our answer is yes to this first, is this stressful question, then we head to question 2, which is, okay, given that this is stressful to me, am I able to handle this? Here, we are considering our resources, our abilities, our connections, and really assessing if we have what we need to successfully manage this situation. So if you're distressed about your lit prof changing, you might consider if there are other ways that you might connect with that previous prof, or if it's possible to change classes at this point so you don't have to take the prof that you've heard negative things about. Or you might just decide, I need this class, I need to check it off, I'll power through. After you've assessed your options and your resources, if your answer to this "can I handle it" question is yes, then you will be more likely to see this stressor as a challenge to overcome. And although it will still be stressful, you are more likely to be successful in your coping than if you doubt whether you can handle it. If your answer to this question is no, or I don't think so, the stressor is more likely to be viewed as a threat to your well-being. And you're more likely to have more difficulty coping and experience more intense levels of distress than if you saw it as more of a challenge. Now, whether you decide that you can handle it or not, as long as you consider it stressful to you, you engage those coping behaviors. And that's what we're going to get into next. Now, pause with me for a moment and think about your own experience with stress. What does it feel like in your body? What does it feel like in your brain? When it comes to the psychological side of things, we often use words like overwhelmed, heavy, scattered, worried, stretched, or, as Bilbo Baggins said in The Lord of the Rings, like butter spread over too much bread. On the physical side, we often feel hot, our heart races, our palms are sweaty, our breathing is more shallow, and we feel like our stomach is in knots. The goal of any coping strategy is to lower or eliminate as much of our felt distress, both the psychological and the physical, as possible. So when it comes to coping, there are 2 main paths that we can take. First, we can target the stressor itself, or we can target the response to the stressor. So let's talk through these for a moment. The target the stressor path, which is also known as problem-focused coping, works best when we actually have some control over the stressor. We know that there is something we can do that can change the situation itself. So in our new lit prof example, you obviously don't have control over the prof change, but you may have the ability to enroll in a different class and eliminate that stressor. Other examples of problem-focused coping might be studying for an upcoming exam, paying a mechanic to fix your broken down car, going to the doctor when you're feeling sick, and finding a new living arrangement when you just can't make things work with your current roommates. Problem-focused coping is at its root problem solving. We're using the resources and experiences we have to figure out a solution. If successful, problem-focused coping eliminates the stressor, relieves that physical and psychological stress response, and gets you back to that happy homeostasis. When we can't target the stressor, so maybe it's outside of our control, like we can't actually change classes to avoid that new prof, or maybe we just don't have the resources, like we don't have the money to pay the mechanic to fix our car. We usually have to rely on that second coping path and target our response. Now, because this involves more internal work, another term for this is emotion-focused coping. So we're trying to adjust our thoughts and our emotional state here rather than the stressor itself. So if we are dealing with this new lit prof situation, and it's just not possible for us to change classes or change profs, then we really need to figure out how to keep this situation from disrupting our entire semester. So one option would be to reframe things. We put it in perspective, or we find a silver lining. Oh, I guess it won't be that bad. I can do anything for 3 months, right? Or, hey, Jordan's in this class too. It'll be fun to have another class with them. Another option might be seeking out social support. So we get with our friends, we share our frustrations, maybe we commiserate, we realize we're not alone, and we feel better. Other examples of emotion-focused coping are maybe going for a run to help release some of that tension that you're feeling right before your presentation, prayer or meditation. Maybe binging your favorite Netflix show to distract yourself from that breakup. And perhaps less helpful, but all too common, drinking or using substances to help the problem go away, at least for a while. So clearly, some emotion-focused coping efforts are better than others when it comes to long-term health and well-being. So ideally, we're building those adaptive coping strategies like reframing and social support so that we don't have to rely on those not so adaptive ones like drinking in the future. The reality is we often use both problem-focused and emotion-focused strategies together. So if you think about stress leading up to an upcoming exam, studying is certainly a problem-focused coping strategy. The exam is testing your knowledge, so you are committing your efforts to gain more knowledge. But you also may go for a run to release some of that tension or commiserate with classmates for some social support, which are both emotion-focused coping strategies. So the more adaptive coping strategies that we can build and have at our disposal when we do encounter stress, the more effective our coping efforts will be. So what happens next? What comes after this coping? At the most basic level, it's simple. If your coping efforts are sufficient and effective, you'll be fine. The stress will go away, or at least be kept to a manageable level, like the rubber band, stretch a little but not too much, and you'll be back at homeostasis, that happy set point of balance. But if your coping efforts are either not sufficient or not effective, and the elevated levels of distress continue for really long periods of time, we are going to run into problems. Physically, a long-term stress response leads to wear and tear on the body. This wear and tear wrecks our immune system, it messes with our digestive system, and it can damage the cardiovascular system, our heart. Down the line, this wear and tear increases our risk for chronic diseases, things like diabetes and heart disease. Now, in college, you're probably not experiencing those downstream disease effects yet, but have you ever gotten sick right after a semester is over? This is so common, and it happens because the strain of the college semester, including the lack of sleep and often poor nutrition that happens during finals week, has drained your immune system of its ability to fight off intruders. So already your body is starting to tell you, get this stress under control, right? As we learned before, stress is not only physical, it's psychological too. And this means that long-term stress can also knock out our mental health. Extended periods of unchecked psychological distress really increase the risk of developing depression or anxiety, or even addictive behaviors like substance use and eating disorders. So if you're finding that your coping efforts and resources are doing the job and you're keeping that stress at healthy levels, keep rocking it. But if you are not, if your feelings of overwhelm, inadequacy, or panic are ever-present companions and you're starting to crumble, please, please, please talk to a mental health professional. Your campus should have an on-campus counseling center, and they will be able to get you started on the path to finding somebody to work with. There are also telehealth options available now where you can chat with a licensed mental health professional through an app. And of course, there's always somebody available to talk at the other end of the crisis helplines shown on the screen. Never feel like asking for help is weakness. Asking for help is strength. And it's building that toolbox so the next time you encounter a stressor, you can be stretched and you can bounce back. Wow, that was a lot. But it's so important to have a really solid foundation of these key concepts and processes related to stress so that we can start building that college coping toolbox in our next videos. I'll see you over there.